order your heights.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming. It is wonderful to see such a big group here today. Before we launch into our program, we'd like to begin, as is traditional for the town of Plymouth, with the tolling of the town bell, which will be done by Ken Tavares, who is a former longtime Select Board member, and his wife, Maggie Tavares, and the bell will be ringing 13 times in honor of the original 13 colonies. Thank you so much, Ken and Maggie, for starting off our ceremony today. For centuries, the sound of a bell has called the people of Plymouth together in this square, though today, admittedly, by means of a more modern device that the residents of 1776 could scarcely have imagined. I'd like to thank you all for being here today. My name is Patrick Brown, and I have the honor of serving as the chair of Plymouth's 250th Commemoration Committee. I'm also the executive director of the Plymouth Antiquarian Society. It will be my privilege to guide us through our ceremony today. And at this time, I would invite you all to stand for the presenting of the colors by the members of the American Legion Post 40 and the New Plymouth Guard.
New Plymouth Guard, attention. Show your honors.
Thank you, gentlemen. We will now have the national anthem, and I just want to caution you that at the close of the national anthem, there will be a rifle salute, just be aware. And I would like to invite Nancy Davis to the podium to sing our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we at the twilight's last gleaming, who brought stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. All the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave? Oh, the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Nancy, thank you so much, and thank you so much to our honor guards. Please be seated. So it is now my pleasure to ask our Select Board Chair, Deborah Iaquinto, to give some opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Patrick. And luckily for all of you, I do not have a singing role in this presentation. But good afternoon, Plymouth, and welcome to our community celebration for America's 250th. On behalf of the Plymouth Select Board, I want to thank all of you for joining us as we commemorate an important milestone in our history, the 250th anniversary of the birth of our nation. While this is a national milestone, there are few places more fitting to begin this celebration than right here in Plymouth, Massachusetts, America's hometown. Long before the American Revolution, the Pilgrims planted the seeds of self-government, civic participation, and local decision-making right here. And these are the very principles that continue to shape our democracy today. In fact, the Mayflower Compact, which was signed in 1620, was the first governing agreement in the New World to establish that a community could govern itself through the consent of its members and enact just and equal laws for the common good. And more than 150 years later, these same ideals directly influenced the writing of the Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, and other founding documents that uphold the freedoms, civil liberties, rights, and responsibilities that we all enjoy today. We will be reading some of these a little later in the program. When I think back on this period of our history, I'm really impressed by the distinctly grassroots feel to how the revolution unfolded in Plymouth. Plymouth was far away from the major battlefields, not anywhere close to the power hubs of Philadelphia. It was just ordinary people like all of us debating what kind of future they wanted to have, meeting in public meetings, sitting around kitchen tables, probably right here in Town Square. I think that's pretty impressive when you think about it. Plymouth was also home to two of the revolution's most influential voices, James Otis and Mercy Otis Warren. Their writings, advocacy, and leadership helped shape the ideas that inspired a movement and ultimately a nation. It's especially meaningful that today's gathering brings together so many voices from across our community. We have town officials, we have state leaders, veterans, students, civic organizations, and of course, all of you, the members of our community. From the beginning, our vision for Plymouth 250 has been that it belongs to everyone. After all, the story of America is the story of communities working together for the common good. On behalf of the Select Board, I want to thank the Plymouth 250th Commemoration Committee for bringing us together today. The American Legion Honor Guard, our state delegation, our fabulous Plymouth Public School students, the Pilgrim Festival Chorus, and all of today's participants and volunteers who made this event possible. And most importantly, I want to thank all the residents of Plymouth. Today we are honoring our past, but we're also looking to our future. It's up to us what we do with the freedoms and responsibilities that have been entrusted to us. History is not something we inherit, it's something we create. And we get to decide how we write the next chapter. Thank you. Are you going to introduce Alex?
Thank you so much, Deb. I would like to now ask Alex Lamoureux to the podium to read Plymouth's land acknowledgement.
We acknowledge that the town of Plymouth is located on the ancestral lands of the Herring Pond Wampanoag, the tribe of indigenous peoples that lived upon the land now known as Plymouth for generations. We pay our respects to the ancestral bloodline of the Herring Pond Wampanoag, all of Wampanoag Nation, and acknowledge the other indigenous peoples of Massachusetts and their descendants who still inhabit their historic territories today.
And Alex is a member of the Plymouth for All committee. So thank you very much, Alex, for being here. Next, I'd like to ask Representative Michelle Badger to come forward to read a joint resolution of the Massachusetts House and Senate.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so honored to be here to help celebrate this occasion, the 250th birthday, our revolutionary roots, and all that happened here to begin that in Plymouth. And for me, it's personally really exciting for me as a descendant of both George Soule and Isaac Allerton. So to have that deep connection to the the Mayflower Compact, and what really is the founding documents that help us continue to do what we do today, where we self-govern, we make sure we're using our voice, and we are making sure that our government is moving forward in the way that we believe it should. And so I am proud today to present this resolution from the Massachusetts General Court, commending the town of Plymouth on its commemoration of the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence and its contribution to the history of the United States of America. Whereas the town of Plymouth will be commemorating the occasion of the 250th anniversary of the signing of Declaration of Independence at several community events in the town, and whereas the English colonists who arrived in that town of Plymouth in 1620 joined together in the Mayflower Compact, a foundational document in American history that helped establish the revolutionary principles of self-governance by the people. And whereas on May 20th, 1776, Plymouth Town Meeting passed the Plymouth Instructions, directing its representatives to use their utmost effort to defend the rights and liberties of the colonies and to, without hesitation, be ready to declare for independence. And whereas Mercy Otis Warren of the town of Plymouth authored works from her home on Main Street that helped strengthen support for the cause of American liberty, and through private correspondence urged members of the Continental Congress to vote for independence. And whereas, nearly 250 years ago, news of the Declaration of Independence spread across the Commonwealth, inspiring its people to defend the spirit of independence, as General James Warren of Plymouth wrote in a letter to John Adams. Therefore, be it resolved that the Massachusetts General Court hereby commend the town of Plymouth on the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and be it hereby resolved that a copy of this resolution be forwarded by the clerk of the House of Representatives to the town of Plymouth, signed by Speaker Ronald Mariano and the House Clerk Tim Carroll, and that also signed by Karen Spilka, President of the Senate, and Michael D. Hurley, Clerk of the Senate, myself, Representative Michelle Badger, Senator Dylan Fernandez, and Kathleen Lenatra, Representative Kathleen Lenatra. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Badger. So we now come to the centerpiece of today's program, and that is the reading of 3 historic documents that help trace Plymouth's long connection to the ideals of self-government, civic duty, and independence. We begin with the Mayflower Compact, composed in 1620 aboard the Mayflower while she lay anchored off the coast of Cape Cod. The Mayflower Compact was written in a moment of uncertainty when those aboard the Mayflower bound themselves together to form a civil community and govern by common consent. Though written more than a century and a half before the Revolution, the Compact gave early expression to the principles of self-rule and mutual civic obligation that would later become central to the American experiment. We thought it fitting that this reading begin with the captain of the New Plymouth Guard, whose members represent Plymouth's Pilgrim era militia, and also by members of the Plymouth Select Board. So, Captain, if you would.
In the name of God, amen. We, whose names are underwritten, the loyal subjects of our dread sovereign, Lord King James, by the grace of God of Great Britain, France, and Ireland, King, Defender of the Faith, etc.
Having undertaken for the glory of God and advancement of the Christian faith, in honor of our King and country, a voyage to plant the first colony in the northern parts of Virginia.
I do thee present, solemn and mutual, in the presence of God and one another, covenant and combine ourselves into the civic body politic for our better ordering and preservation and furtherance of the ends aforesaid.
And by virtue hereof to enact, constitute, and frame such just and equal laws, ordinances, acts, constitutions, and offices from time to time, as shall be thought most meet and convenient for the general good of the colony, unto which we promise all due submission and obedience.
In witness whereof, we have hereunder subscribed our names at Cape Cod, the 11th of November, in the year of the reign of our sovereign Lord, King James of England, France, and Ireland, the 18th, and of Scotland, the 54th, Anno Domini 1620.
John Carver, William Bradford, Edward Winslow, William Brewster, Isaac Allerton, Miles Standish, John Alden, John Turner, Francis Eaton, James Tilton, John Craxton, John Billington, Moses Fletcher, John Goodman, Samuel Fuller, Christopher Martin, William Mullins, William White, Richard Warren, John Howland, Stephen Hopkins, Diggory Priest, Thomas Williams, Gilbert Winslow, Edmund Margerson, Peter Brown, Richard Britteridge, George Soule, Edward Tilley, John Tilley, Francis Cook, Thomas Rogers, Thomas Tinker, John Rigsdale, Edward Fuller, Richard Clark, Richard Gardner, Mr. John Allerton, Thomas English, Edward Doughty, Edward Leister.
Thank you so much, Captain Woolman, and to our select board. So we've gathered today outside the 1749 courthouse, which stood at the center of Plymouth civic life during the Revolution. Plymouth citizens met there to debate the great questions of the day. There, town meeting condemned the Boston Massacre. They praised the destruction of the tea in Boston Harbor and made preparations for the defense of Plymouth Bay when war finally came. Within those walls, town meeting confronted the full burden of a community at war, raising men for military service, managing a dangerous smallpox epidemic, providing aid to soldiers' wives and children, and meeting one urgent necessity after another. Plymouth's revolution unfolded not only inside that building, which I tend to think of as one of the most important historic sites in this town, but Plymouth's revolution also unfolded here in Town Square. Crowds gathered here for public demonstrations and protests. The town's Liberty Pole stood just there, very close to where our flagpoles stand today. Plymouth Rock itself, or a piece of it anyway, was hauled here in 1774 by Plymouth's patriots, and on October 4 of that year, an estimated 4,000 people, according to an eyewitness, from across Plymouth County assembled here in Town Square. Imagine that, 4,000 people spilling out into these streets for the purpose of shutting down the royal courts meeting in that building and to compel Crown-appointed officials to renounce their authority. So, as this next document is read, I ask you to imagine this place not as a quiet, historic square, but as a charged and crowded public space, filled with debate, with resolve, and dramatic events. Of course, among Plymouth's revolutionary leaders, none were more influential than James and Mercy Otis Warren, and they've already been mentioned today, but allow me to underscore. At their home on the corner of Main and North Streets, which still stands, they welcomed some of the leading figures of the patriot cause, including John and Abigail Adams, Samuel Adams, and James Otis. From that house, they corresponded with members of Continental Congress and helped shape the principles for which Americans were preparing to risk everything. Mercy's writings, in particular, carried Plymouth's influence far beyond this town, stirring readers across the colonies. On May 20, 1776, in that building, Plymouth Town Meeting adopted the resolutions we now call the Plymouth Instructions. And I'm pleased to say that Connor Anderson, the town's archivist, has put out the clerk's original copy in a case on display so you can see the Plymouth Instructions for yourself inside the museum here. These Plymouth Instructions were addressed to James Warren and Isaac Lothrop, Plymouth's representatives to the legislature. The instructions declared what the town expected of them in a moment of war and at a historic point of no return. The Plymouth Instructions will now be read by James and Mercy Otis Warren.
To the Honorable James Warren, Esquire, and Isaac Lothrop, Esquire. Gentlemen, as we have this day chose you to represent us in the great and general court of this colony, and as matters of the greatest importance must necessarily come before you in the course of this year, with your constituents having an undoubted right, do instruct and in the most solemn manner charge you that you use all your influence, that you exert every power in you vested in defense of the rights, the liberties, and properties of the American colonies in general, and of this colony in particular, in opposition to the impious effort of the proud, the imperious, and worse than savage court of Great Britain, which seems to be lost to every sense of justice and determined to deluge all America in blood and carnage unless we, by a tame, unmanly submission, will put ourselves in their power to be controlled by them as they please in all cases whatsoever. We, your constituents, resenting such insolent and notoriously unjust demands of the British Parliament and of their tyrannic king, do instruct you.
First, that you without hesitation be ready to declare for independence on Great Britain, in whom no confidence can be placed, provided the Honourable Continental Congress shall think that measure necessary. And we, for our parts, do assure you that we will stand by the determination of the Continental Congress in this important and, as we think, very necessary measure, at the risk of our lives and fortunes. Secondly, we wish you to use your influence that such a form of government may be adopted as may appear most salutary and which may bid fairest to ensure a permanent harmony to the colonies and the weal, happiness, and prosperity of America to the latest posterity. In particular, we recommend it to you to use your influence that executive and legislative officers in the government do not meet in one and the same person. Plymouth, May 20th, 1776. Signed, John Torrey, Theophilus Cotton, William Watson. Then a vote was called to know if the town will accept said report. It passed in the affirmative unanimously.
And thus spoke Plymouth on the matter of independence more than a month before the Declaration was voted. So, we now turn to the Declaration itself. Congress voted in favor of independence on July 2nd, and on July 4th, 1776, approved the text of the Declaration. On July 17, the Massachusetts legislature ordered that copies be sent to every town in the Commonwealth, and that ministers in each town read the Declaration to their congregations on the first Sabbath after receiving it. We do not know the exact day when the first public reading of the Declaration took place here in Plymouth, but it is reasonable to imagine Reverend Chandler Robbins standing before his congregation in the wooden building that once stood right here behind me, perhaps on July 21st or Sunday, July 28, 1776, and reading aloud the words that changed the meaning of the struggle in which this town was already deeply engaged. Today, we honor that act of public reading by hearing the Declaration in many voices and including several generations.
In Congress, July 4, 1776, the unanimous Declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness.
Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experiences hath soon that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty, to throw off such government, and to provide new guards for their future security.
Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he is utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people.
He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent upon his will alone for the tenure of their officers and the amount and payment of their salaries.
He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people. He ate out their substance. He has kept among us, in times of peace, standing armies without the consent of the legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to the judicial foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, given to his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by mock trial from punishment for the murders which they should commit on our inhabitants of these states.
for cutting off all trade with all parts of the world, for imposing tax on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of the tribe by jury, for transporting us beyond the seas to be tried for pretend offense.
For abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example of and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens, taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hand.
We pause here for a moment to acknowledge that the next passage contains dehumanizing language about Indigenous people, including words such as savage and merciless that are no longer acceptable in our society today, as well as a characterization of Native Americans that we reject. Reading the Declaration in full requires us to face both its enduring ideals and the painful contradictions embedded in the nation's founding.
He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undisguised destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions.
In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends.
We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, and General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is, and ought to be, totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance of the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
Georgia.
Button, Gwinnett. Lyman Hall. George Walton. North Carolina. William Hooper. Joseph Hughes. John Penn. South Carolina. Edward Rutledge, Thomas Hayward Jr., Thomas Lynch Jr., Arthur Middleton.
Maryland. Samuel Chase, William Paca, Thomas Stone, Charles Carroll of Carrollton. Delaware. Caesar Rodney, George Reed, and Thomas McKean. Virginia. George Wythe, Richard Henry Lee, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Harrison, Thomas Nelson Jr., Francis Lightfoot Lee, and Carter Braxton.
Pennsylvania. Robert Morris, Benjamin Rush, Benjamin Franklin, John Morton, George Clymer, Jane Smith, George Taylor, James Wilson, and George Ross.
New York. William Floyd, Philip Livingston, Francis Lewis, Lewis Morris. New Jersey. Richard Stockton, John Witherspoon, Francis Hopkinson, John Hart, Abraham Clark.
New Hampshire. Josiah Bartlett, William Whipple, Matthew Thornton. Massachusetts. John Hancock, Samuel Adams, John Adams, Robert Treat Payne, and Elbridge Gerry. Rhode Island. Stephen Hopkins and William Ellery. Connecticut. Roger Sherman, Samuel Huntington, William Williams, and Oliver Wolcott.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking all our readers. Well, that nearly concludes our ceremonies today. I want to thank all of our readers and participants. Many thanks to our 250th Commemoration Committee who planned this event, and especially thank you to all of you for being here today and showing such support for the town of Plymouth. Thank you. Before we close, I invite you, and we have some right here up at the podium. We also have some inside the 1749 Courthouse Museum. I invite you to pick up our brand new Plymouth Liberty Trail, which has been another project of this committee to produce a guide to various sites here downtown that are closely connected to the Revolutionary period. And I hope you will step inside the 1749 courthouse and go upstairs and try to imagine a packed room up there, people debating the most urgent matters of their time and setting the course for Plymouth during the Revolution. Refreshments have very kindly been provided by the Church of the Pilgrimage, so please do step inside and enjoy. And if you would like to try your own hand at the ringing of the town bell, I invite you to see Mr. Bill Cohan right here at the Mayflower Meeting House. And I would like to point out that after our singers, the bells will chime, and that will be done by Laura Barnes, whose father, Philip Barnes, was the bell ringer here in Plymouth, and whose grandfather, Philip Barnes Sr., was the bell ringer here in Plymouth. So we are very honored. We are very honored to have Laura Barnes conducting the chimes after our ceremony. And we will now close. We are so excited to have the wonderful Pilgrim Festival Chorus here to perform two selections. The first is called Chester. It was a popular patriotic anthem of the Revolutionary era. The second is America the Beautiful, and I hope you will all join in singing the latter. The lyrics are printed on the back of your program, and on behalf of Plymouth's 250th Commemoration Committee, thank you again for being here. I wish you all a wonderful and historic 4th of July. And now, please enjoy the Pilgrim Festival Chorus.